Okay, hi. So this is Mr. Oliver, and I'm talking about, guess what? The next chapter in the book. So, post-Napoleonic Europe. Let's talk. So, the Congress of Vienna. Congress of Vienna is basically putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. Because the way that it was that Napoleon had messed everything up. So Napoleon had conquered Europe, he had redrawn borders. Congress of Vienna is like, we are the places that defeated Napoleon. We are the quadruple alliance. So we've got Britain, that's the way they talk over there. We got France. What? Wait a second. France didn't beat France. Yeah, I know France didn't beat France. But France gets to participate because France wiggles their way into the whole thing. So that's weird. Who else was on the side that defeated them? Prussia. Russia. And Austria. So I didn't forget that. It's just I have students in here and they're distracting me. So what their goal is to maintain the balance of power in Europe. In other words, to put everything right so that the 5 major nations of Europe, and again, France, Britain, Austria, Prussia, Russia, all get to be equal, on equal footing. What about the other countries? Forget them. We don't care about them. It's just the major countries. So, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix things? Number 1, put the Bourbon dynasty back into power in France. I thought Louis the 16th died. Louis the 16th was dead. Still was. Guess you could say he was the head of state, given that he was decapitated. But but now we have another one, and we have Louis the 18th, as DJ Khaled would say, another one. So we have Louis's brother, who we call Louis the 18th. You say, wait a second, what about Louis the 17th? Louis the 17th would be the next number. There is no Louis the 17th. It's because Louis the 16th's children had died whilst they were imprisoned by the revolutionaries. So Louis the 18th is the next one because the kid died and he has a ceremonial, like he's Louis the 17th, but he never actually served as like a true king or anything like that. So we got the Bourbon dynasty back. Again, the kids are all gone now, so that should be good. Hi. So the Low Countries, when we say the Low Countries, we're talking about the Netherlands. We put them all together again, and they're now under the control of the Dutch monarchy. Remember how there was a north and a south side, basically? There was the Austrian Netherlands, and for a while there was Spanish Netherlands, and they were the Austrian Netherlands again. All of that is back together so that the Dutch are united now. The Prussians are given territory on the eastern border of France. Now this is because they want to make sure the French don't get out of control and try to take over Europe again. So what are we going to do? Give the Germans more territory. That will make sure that France doesn't get out of line. It does. It's also the area in which the Germans will invade France a couple of times during the 20th century. Ladies, feast your eyes on this fella right here. This guy, Metternich, is the Austrian foreign minister. And when I say Austrian foreign minister, he's not the king, okay, so don't get that mixed up. But Clemens von Metternich is a very important figure in history because he's the Austrian guy that is basically running the show. He is a diplomacy master. Do you mind? He's diplomacy master. And I'm not going to edit this stuff out. I just want everyone to know that Cammie and Brooklyn are distracting because they're just wandering in, putting me on. You. Oh, who's behind? Okay.
Alexa.
And then,
what do you call nosy pepper?
What do you call a nosy pepper?
Jalapeno business.
Metternich is a very conservative gentleman. He wants to take out all liberal and revolutionary movements all over Europe. He considers liberalism to be a plague. And if you look at it from his perspective, he goes, okay, look at the French Revolution. How did that turn out? Turned out very poorly if you were a rich guy in charge of a country. He is a rich guy who is the foreign minister of a country. So he is his goal is to make sure it never happens again. He calls up the Austrians, or he is Austria, sorry. He doesn't call it himself. He calls up the Prussians and the Russians, and he's like, dude, we need to stomp out all liberalism. And they're like, the Russians are like, stop, we need to. This is a good move. We must stop. And the Prussians are like, Achtung, we must! So they do. Now, let's back up for a minute. Back up. What is liberalism? Well, liberalism is the idea that if you are a rich, white, property-owning person, you should have the right to vote. Now again, this is not to be mistaken with the liberalism of... In fact, the whole idea of liberalism today is different. The only thing that's really similar would be like if you say liberalism means change and conservatism means stay the same. I mean, that's very rough. But if you just look at it that way, okay, you can say they're somewhat similar. But like nowadays, liberals, this is not their main thing. It's like making sure people can vote. Everyone accepts that everyone can vote. Conservatives accept that everyone can vote. But back then, 19th century conservatives were like, ooh, why should we give the people this right? This is wrong. Ooh. And they were all fans, not the conservatives, the liberals, I mean, of Adam Smith. Oh, Adam Smith? You mean that Scottish professor that wrote On the Wealth of Nations? The guy that comes up with the whole concept of capitalism? The idea that you should act in your own best self-interest? Yeah, that's what I mean. It is. It's true. Now we got to roll over to nationalism. Nationalism is when you look at your nation. Now you say, well, okay, we, at least my students, we all live in America. So we have a common culture. We are Americans. And as Americans, we understand that certain things are like things we do. We have barbecues. At a barbecue, you would expect to have hot dogs and hamburgers. We have a national anthem. We have cultural values, like we root for the underdog. We root for freedom and freedom of speech. These are things we prize. No matter where you are in the United States, there are things that bond us all together, even though there are certainly things that separate us. We have a flag that unifies us. We have, you could say, that most Americans share certain ideas, like, hey, the most important founding fathers are our founding fathers. Your George Washingtons, your Benjamin Franklins, your Thomas Jeffersons. I don't know why I said Thomas, but Thomas Jeffersons. Those fellas, those guys are all members of our collective culture. Religiously, we celebrate a holiday every December. Christmas. You might be like, but I don't celebrate Christmas. But in America, and I'm not saying we're necessarily a Christian nation, but the majority of Americans at this point certainly do share certain commonalities, and in this case, it's religion. If I say, oh, on Easter, there's going to be a celebration, I don't think most Americans are like, what's Easter? I don't know what that is. You know, because that is a thing that the majority of Americans celebrate. They might celebrate it differently. You might just be like, oh, I'm going to hide eggs. That's all I'm going to do. But it's a common culture based off of, in some cases, the religious stuff that comes from Christianity, and specifically Protestant Christianity. You might go like, actually, Mr. Oliver, there's Catholicism too. And I'm like, yeah, I know. You know how many presidents have been Catholic? I'll pause. Who knew? Know who? John F. Kennedy. And people flipped out in the 60s at the idea that we would have a non-Protestant as our commander-in-chief. They were like, oh, he's going to take orders from the Pope, which of course was not the case. But there was fear about it. Okay, what other religions have there been? That's right, only Protestant Christians. That says something about our commonality as a nation. Oh, I didn't finish talking about that. My bad. Sorry, the kids, it's their soccer thing. They were all just wandering in because they're going to their soccer practice. So how does this relate to what we're talking about back in the 19th century? Well, there were some countries that weren't countries yet. There were some cultures that weren't countries yet. For example, the Germans. You say like, the Prussians were Germans. Yeah, so were the Austrians. So were the Saxons. So were the Bavarians. A lot of different countries back then had German as your common language. They had a common culture. They had a common religion in the north, primarily Protestant. In the south, primarily Catholic, but all Christian for the most part. Common history, you could look back to the Middle Ages, the Germanic states. You had a commonality there, but they didn't have a country yet. What about the Czechs, the Bohemians we've talked about? This is what is going to become the Czech Republic. Those people had a common history and culture, but they were under the control of the Austrians. The Greeks certainly have a long common history and a common culture and a common language, all of these things, but they were under the control of the Ottoman Empire. Nationalism is the idea that cultural bonds should become national bonds. Now, let's go back to why I was talking about America. I was talking about America because we have common symbols that unite us. We have common foods that you could say, oh, okay, that's American food. Hamburger, hot dog. That's an American thing. We're going to go watch a movie. We're going to go do America stuff. We're going to, shoot guns in the air. America. We're going to launch things on fire. Fireworks on July 4th. It's our common holiday. Well, other cultures in the 19th century started saying, we should have our own country. And if you're under the control of someone else, that means perhaps we should become independent of that country and sort of slide over and be our own thing. So that's going to create problems. This is the Venn diagram, if you're looking at that, of nationalism and liberalism, often really overlapped. You didn't have a lot of conservatives that were like, oh, we should make a new country and destroy the old balance of power. No! That was the whole thing with the Congress of Vienna, is balance of power. So the whole idea of nationalism is very liberal. What about Romanticism? Mr. Oliver, do you mean romantic like No, I don't. That's weird. Why are you making that face? Stop. No, I mean romantic like looking back on things and going like, oh, I remember when I went into the mountains. It was beautiful. I felt free in a way that civilization never allows me to be. That's what Romanticism is when we're talking about 19th century Romanticism. We're not talking about Jack and Rose. We're talking about a revolt against the Enlightenment, against the scientific way of walking into the world and going like, look at that tree. How does that work? Let's analyze it. Oh, it's got a root system, and it's got the things that carry water up and down, which I used to know when I was younger, but I've forgotten. And it's got, all that, whatever, science. Romantics say, can we not appreciate the beauty of the tree? May we not simply appreciate the glory of nature that our Creator has given to us? Simply coming here makes me feel closer to God, whereas a civilization with its artificial streets and its veneer of, oh, we are so civilized. I do not accept it. Because a romantic would like emotion. Follow your dreams. Oh, Dad, you want me to be a barber because everyone's been a barber? Well, guess what? I want to play music. I want to pursue my own dreams. I want to follow my heart. I don't want to be a dentist. I do want to be a dentist. I'm like Herbie the elf from the Rudolph the... I want to be a elf that makes toys. That's not me, Dad. I want to be a dentist. Spontaneity. Let's follow our dreams. Follow our own true purpose. Now, nowadays, we in America especially, we take this for granted. It's like when you grow up, your father's probably your dad, your mom. They're not putting a ton of pressure on you like, you must do this. There's a certain expectation that you are going to find yourself. And that's a romantic holdover from the 19th century. The love of nature thing comes from what I was saying before, the whole idea that maybe the Industrial Revolution and the science behind it and all that, maybe that's not the way things should be. Maybe that's kind of a way of keeping us in line. Maybe we should listen to our heart. Let's look at some art. This one here. You got homie here. And he's like, oh, I'm gonna walk up here to these rocks and look down on a sea of fog. If you're so high up, you're looking at a sea of fog, you're pretty high up, brother. Why is he there? Does it matter? He is a wanderer. Does he look like a poor chap? Probably not. Look at this waistcoat he's got. He's got a walking stick, fancy shoes and whatnot, boots, I guess. He's just wandering because he simply wants to discover. Maybe he woke up one day and he's like, oh, I must go out and explore. Look around. Whereas the opposite, neoclassic painting, says, no. We need to focus on our morals. Look back to the past for inspiration. Yeah, Mr. Oliver, so that's a little bit like Renaissance stuff. Yeah, except the focus on morality. And also, this is the style of painting for the French during the Revolution and during the Napoleonic years. For example, here is the death of Marat, which Marat is, of course, this guy that's writing The Friend of the People, this newspaper dude, and he is laying in his medicinal bath, and it's like a lotion bath because he had this weird skin condition because he lived in the sewers for a while. We've all been there. And he is like he's probably writing, like, hey, these people need to die. But he was murdered by Charlotte Corday. But when he dies, he looks noble. And he's not a good-looking dude. I mean, I'm not saying nothing about dudes with skin conditions that have to take medicinal baths every day. But homie was not a great-looking dude. So Marat is shown here in an almost Christ-like pose. And people really bought into this. The moral here is not, hey, don't write death sentences for people. The moral is, Marat died for us. He was a hero of the revolution. Remember your heroes. They are, in many ways, the ones we should really be looking to. Ooh, anti-clericalism. So let's play a game. What kind of painting is it? Is it romantic or neoclassic? This one here. Salisbury Cathedral from the Bishop's Grounds by John Constable. Well, emphasis on nature. Human figures are in it, but less important. I mean, I think there are probably a couple of peoples here. That's an animal. So is that. Okay, well, maybe there's people back there. There's some shapes that suggest it. But the point is, it's nature. It's tranquil. So probably, did you say Romanticism? Because that's the right answer. This one here, the death of Socrates. Socrates was a Greek. This is an image of him taking poison because he told the truth. Like literally, he was out there truth-telling, being real. They didn't want him to win, as DJ Khaled would say. And he's like, oh, I'm sentenced to death? Hey, I'm going to do this. Drinking hemlock. And all his followers like, oh, this guy's hecka emo. Look at this guy over here. There's Plato looking all sad. Poor Plato. I don't mean the toy, the clay thing. I mean this philosopher Plato. That's him. He's not clay. So what do you think? Greek subject? Teaching a lesson? That's right. Neoclassicism. How about this one? Jacques-Louis David. Napoleon study. Remember Mr. Oliver said that neoclassical painting is something we identify with the French Revolution and the Napoleonic era. It's of Napoleon, so probably Napoleonic era. It's Napoleon painted here looking heroic. Frankly, a little paunchy. I might go with Spanx instead of those pants, but that's just me. So what do you think? That's right, neoclassical. How about this one with the kind of emo title, Peace, Burial at Sea? Well, image of nature, a ship. Maybe there's some sort of kind of like, hey, we're reflecting here on death and what it means to, leave this mortal coil of ours. That's right, Romanticism. Who about this one? Hussein. You've got the adoration of the golden calf. Mr. Oliver, that is not a Greek or a Roman story. It's a biblical story. Yeah, it is. But it's a biblical story that teaches us that's right, there's a moral to it. There's a message to it. The story from the Bible is that while Moses went up to the top of Mount Sinai, he's getting the Ten Commandments. Meanwhile, everyone downstairs, back on the floor, they're all like, whoa, YOLO, let's start worshiping this golden calf. Because he's gone for a while, right? So, I mean, I'm not saying that's like a reasonable thing to do. I'm just saying that's what they did. So, everyone down there is doing this. And this is the adoration of the golden calf. You're supposed to look at this as a good 18th century fella, or actually 19th century fella, and go like, cannot believe those people lack morals, that they have worshipped a false idol. Boom. So therefore it must be neoclassic, right? How about this one? Also Poussin. And this one's about a plague. Plague. Nature. What was the plague of Ash? Okay, this one is not a story you probably just know off the top of your head. But if you look back here, and if you've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, okay, this one requires a little bit of biblical knowledge, but also a little pop culture knowledge helps out a little bit too. That's the Ark of the Covenant, which is supposedly where they kept the Ten Commandments, and thus it was a holy relic to the Jews. So again, we're talking Old Testament Bible here. This was a Philistine city, and they stole the Ark of the Covenant. They were punished by God with a plague of boils, and you can see some weird things on the people, and then mice came later on as well. They are, and I believe that's a mouse there. I might be wrong about that. Anyway, yeah, there's mices. Look at mouse, mices everywhere. So, look, more. Boom. Another one, another one, another one, another one. So, they are just having a bad old time. What is it? It's a moral. Don't mess with God. Now, you might be like, Mr. Oliver, are you trying to convert us? I'm not saying that this is a thing you must believe. I'm saying this is a thing that the people who saw this painting would have been familiar with, because they would have been like, oh, Old Testament, that's still part of what we believe as Christians in Europe in the 19th century. And so we get the message of this. The moral, you might say. Ergo, therefore, neoclassical, right? Another one by Constable, The White Horse. The story is that he was paid to make a picture, to make a painting of this guy's horse. So he did. There it is. But the thing is, that was not the focus of the painting as it was supposed to be, because what Constable does is he takes this big old landscape and makes it into like, oh, hey guys, I love nature. And so that's the focus instead. So, what do you think? I'm not saying that romantic paintings never have human focus, but you don't see it as much, and especially with the emphasis on nature and mood. Doesn't this feel tranquil when you look at it? Absolutely, right? So, romantic, right? Another one, Cloister Cemetery in the Snow. This one might look a little different. You might be like, wow, that doesn't even look like a painting. It's a photograph of a painting because it was actually destroyed during World War II by accident. Anyway, nature focus shows another theme you're going to see a lot in Romanticism, which is that human structures don't last. Nature lasts forever. So you have here this, probably at one point this was like a mighty gate or something. Maybe it was part of some sort of religious thing. I guess what I take from the word cloister. And time has eroded the great walls of this cloister. Therefore, it is that's right, romantic. Raft of the Medusa. Now, here's one of those exceptions. This is a romantic painting, I'll just go ahead and tell you, that is showing the power of nature over humans. And if you look at it, you go like, what? I just see like a bunch of naked people. And yeah, there are naked people on here, but the Medusa was a shipwreck that you would have been familiar with in the 19th century, that you would have heard about it. And the people were at sea for a long time. What's important here is the message is kind of like, yo, you are just a person. You're just a human. Nature makes you look like the small, insignificant little thing you are. Any power you think you have over nature, it's temporary, it's an illusion. That's what the Romantics are kind of saying here. And again, they could relate that back to their religion, and they could say, ultimately humans, you guys aren't in charge. Nature is. And they would identify nature with godliness and God. This one, I include this one because this one I have a personal connection to. Sometimes you'll go to a museum or what have you, and you'll see a picture and it just gets you and kicks you in the gut. This one was the first time I'd ever been to a museum, seen a picture, and just went like, whoa. Because at first you look at this and it's just like, oh, it's a little girl. Okay, whatevs. But the more you look at it, the more you see like there's a sadness about this girl. And it's just something off. Like, why is it? Why does she look so sad? Why did the painter feel the need to have this painting? Like, why did he choose her as a subject? And so you look at it a little bit more. And what does it mean? And ultimately, you got to look at the title, The Broken Pitcher. And sure enough, there is a pitcher here in the picture, in the painting. And a little bit of research later on, I didn't even get this at the time, but a little bit of research later on showed that sometimes a pitcher or a vessel were a kind of a metaphor of talking about a girl's virtue or, her virginity. So knowing that, and then you go back to this painting, now all of a sudden there is subtext here that makes you go like, oh my God, that's terrible. So maybe this girl was the victim of some kind of terrible rape or something. We don't know exactly. But then it has this whole other level. You look at this painting, you're like, oh God, it's awful. But a romantic painting is meant to evoke something within you, a feeling. That's the important thing. So that is why Bouguereau chose this subject. And that is why he used the symbolism of the picture. Because he's trying to make you feel something inside. This is not necessarily a moralistic painting. This is more just like going straight to your emotion and your feelings. If you're a human, you should feel something here. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, that's why I include this. This is my favorite romantic painting, not because I like what it represents, but because it, to me, is a thing that connected with me, and I really like that. I felt something when I looked at art that was like 150 years old. This one, very different. Joseph William Turner, Sunrise with Sea Monsters. Just showing that romantic paintings can have a little bit of whimsy with them. Obviously, sea monsters are not real, but the painting, which is so like abstract, like you really can't make out a lot of detail except this kind of weird face in the water. It's romantic. It's just saying again, hey, you're just human. There's more out there that you don't understand. Another one that's kind of a focus on nature. So again, if you see a focus on nature, it's probably a romantic painting. This one, the Sabine women. This is how the Romans originally acquired women for their new town that they were trying to get going, stealing their women of a nearby city. This one is neoclassical. I wouldn't necessarily say it's moralistic because, I mean, ultimately the Romans are stealing women with the intention of impregnating them and starting a new town. And that's really rapey and awful. So this one's more of a classical kind of thing, more than a moralistic kind of thing. This one, again, nature scene. Brutal, though. You look at this and you see like, oh, okay, that's a lion devouring a horse. And it's realistic and yet it's not. The staging of it and all, and the way the horse looks, it's like, I don't really think horses look like that. I've never seen a horse being eaten by a lion. The lion, of course, right here, lion lurking in the shadows. But it's meant to kind of evoke a feeling from you, again, that nature can be cruel and nature can be beautiful. Here all around it's beautiful, and here it can also have a darkness to it. So romantic. This one is probably the hardest one because you got a figure here. It's a portrait of a woman with gambling mania. And you might be tempted to go like, oh, okay, gambling mania, addiction to gambling, that seems bad, so maybe it's a moral thing. And I can definitely see where you're coming from. But it's a romantic painting because it's meant to kind of show us a feeling. It's meant to show us something that you look at and you connect with. And you can look into her face and see something unusual about humanity. So, but this one I would say is probably, you could go either way on this, but it's romantic. This one, I show a movie on this in my class. This is by Joseph William Turner. And this one is about a slave ship that threw over hundreds of men, women, and children who were sick in order to claim them as losses at sea. In other words, obviously an awful, terrible event. And the people that are thrown out here are being consumed by kind of mysterious fish, I guess, sharks maybe, some kind of giant fish here. This one, you could definitely see this as moralistic because Turner was hardcore anti-slavery, even after slavery was illegal in Britain, which was the early 1800s, 1804, I believe. But this is still meant to be like, hey, things aren't great even mid-century here or late century because there's still slavery in other parts of the world. And he's kind of saying like, hey, everybody, let's remember this. It's still bad in other parts of the world. Slavery is still a thing we, the Britons, did once. So he's kind of being a spoilsport. All right, I wanted to finish by talking about socialism and Marxism. But in order to talk about socialism, we got to talk about, well, what do socialists believe? So socialists believe in a couple of things. They believe in economic planning, which is to say, they believe that the government should be heavily involved in decisions relating to the economy. The socialists believe the government should make sure that there are no poor people. Poor people are given jobs. Poor people are made to not be poor. They're taken care of in every way. And we might nowadays think like, oh, you mean like healthcare? Yeah, like healthcare. Like in every way. The government is there for the people. So the government should be protecting them from potential predators. And back then, especially in the time period, think about what was going on. You got the Industrial Revolution, you got bad factory conditions. Socialism comes out of that and says, we need to protect the workers from the owners. The owners, all they care about is profit. So we got to get rid of the things that are making the poor be treated so badly. And really, nowadays, because of these kind of thoughts, we have a shorter work week, a shorter work day, all that kind of stuff that they did not have back then. Now, socialists also believe, in a very pure sense, that in order to make sure that businesses are complying with their ideas, with the government's ideas, that the government take over those businesses. In other words, that you don't have private property. And that would be like the big goal. There's a lot of in-between in socialism. Now notice, up here it says French, not just socialism, French utopian socialism. They didn't call themselves utopians. Utopians, as you might recall from Thomas More, are people who believe that utopia is a place that can never exist. It's a perfect world, but it can never exist. Karl Marx looked at these socialists and he said, you think that people are willingly going to give up their stuff? That the rich are willingly going to give power over to the government? That the workers will willingly be taken care of by these people that used to oppress them? Fat chance. That's not going to happen. So he says, you guys are a bunch of utopians. You believe in this perfect society that doesn't exist. So that's why we call them French utopian socialists, because that's what Karl Marx called them. They would have just called themselves socialists. Karl Marx, he's a different animal. We'll talk about him in a little bit. A couple of guys, and honestly, these guys kind of represent the further boundaries of what exactly it meant to be a socialist. You got guys like Charles Fourier. And Fourier believed women were basically slaves to their husbands. And okay, you could say like, oh, that's kind of a feminist kind of idea. It's just early for it. And this is a guy. He believed, okay, the only way that women are going to be free in our society is if we make them totally equal, give them the right to vote, and get rid of marriage. Now, you might have been with him before. But Fourier is all like, no, get rid of marriage. Marriage is just saying, this person belongs to me. I'm going to put my name on her, the last name, adoption, and now she's mine. Well, that's no good, says Fourier, so we need to get rid of all marriage. He was something of a free liver, if you know what I mean. Proudhon, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, super French name, says, look, you want to know who's really should be in charge? The workers. Why? Because you look at a factory. Who's doing all the work? The worker. They produce these products, the shirts, blankets, whatever, these textiles. And yet who makes the most profit? Not the workers. Property, therefore, is theft. If you say, I own this, not you, you're lying. You're stealing from the workers. That's no good. So, what is property? It's a famous thing. But here comes this fella. Now, I'm saying Marxian socialism, more commonly known as communism. Marxian socialism is just socialism, all the things socialists believe, except you add one thing, and that is violent revolution. Okay? In 1848, Karl Marx, along with Friedrich Engels, said, look, there is a problem in this world, and that problem is that the owners are taking advantage of the workers. Again, that's very socialist, right? So that's why we call it Marxian socialist. He says, though, we can't work within the system to fix this problem. We need to destroy the system and build a new system. So there needs to be a violent revolution. Now he uses some vocab that you need to know. He calls the owners the bourgeoisie, which you might remember that they were the wealthier members of the middle class. That's during the French Revolution. So now bourgeoisie takes on this different thing. They're the enemy of the worker. And the workers, the proletariat, they are the more numerous, large group that's being held down by the owner. I don't even know who put this in here. What is that? Let's just move on. All right, I'm going to stop here. No, I don't want to stop on that. I'm going to stop here. Hopefully this was helpful. We'll do a part 3, and then I think this bad boy will be all done. So, peace.